Welcome to episode 2 of Progress Theory. I appreciate anyone who is stopping in, who is deciding to listen to this. The main idea of this episode is accepting universal suffering. I chose this topic pretty deliberately for episode 2 because the message I kept reiterating in the foundational episode was the purpose of this podcast is learning how to optimize the human experience for well-being. That is the core idea I want to craft every episode around. Suffering is a very important concept to explore given that overarching purpose, because from what I understand and believe, suffering is the direct antithesis to well-being. And to do this effectively, I think it's important to start off just by defining suffering in general, and then breaking it down into subcategories in order to identify specific solutions to the different variants of suffering that we experience. So to start off with, it is very difficult to define something as all-encompassing and universal as suffering without oversimplifying it. And so I think I may be doing this, oversimplifying this concept with the definition I'm about to share. But it's the easiest. I think it is the most efficient definition I could come up with, which is suffering is an experience that is undesirable, painful, or miserable because of how it is experienced physically, emotionally, or mentally. Again, that might be too narrow. It might be too much of an oversimplification. But I think a lot of what constitutes as suffering, as experienced suffering, can fit into that definition. But to break it down more specifically, I think there are two broad categories of suffering that are very important to go into and to distinguish from each other. There is personal experienced suffering, and there is cosmic suffering. Now, I'm going to start off with personal experience suffering because it is, frankly, as selfish, as intrinsically selfish creatures, it is the variant of suffering that is more interesting to most of us, I think, or that we find ourselves focusing on a lot more often, at least. So, with personal experience suffering, this is suffering that is very unique to you, in which, as creatures who are trapped within one perspective, it feels all-consuming, and it completely takes over our individual conscious experience, but it is, to some degree, unique to our conscious experience. I think there's another really important distinction to be made within this category. There is personal experience suffering that is self-induced, and there is personal suffering that is intrinsic to existence and which is completely outside of our control. The most beneficial suffering to actually focus on, and the one with the most direct solution, is absolutely self-induced suffering. There are a lot of different versions of this. I think some of the most obvious are like addictive behavioral patterns, a victim complex, general self-absorption, ineffective value systems or worldview. And not to say most of these things are not, to some degree, you can't be blamed fully for them. They are a result of the programming you received from your environment. But they are still a product of your own way of being and interacting in the world. And due to that, they are a result of your own beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions. Um, Now, all of those are a bit more specific and they seem nuanced. Like addictive behavioral patterns are tied to a victim complex, but it's a different thing, which can have uh, different consequences. And same with overarching self-absorption, value system, or worldview that is ineffective and leads to unnecessary pain. But I think a way to generally describe uh, all self-induced suffering is an inability to overcome flawed thought or emotional patterns or faulty and destructive belief systems. Now, the benefit to this category of suffering is there is a very direct solution to it. Um, and just because it's direct does not mean it's easy. I think it's very difficult, but by adopting and continually reinforcing effective belief systems and behavioral patterns, most self-induced suffering that plagues human beings can be reduced or, if not, completely nullified. Uh, Now, this is not, again, it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. A word that effectively encompasses this idea is self-mastery. Um, and I'm becoming more convinced that self-mastery is, it's not a black and white thing. I think it is very easy to fall into this mindset that if you're for people that crave self-mastery and growth, that there is some point of arrival where they will have it all figured out and they will be able to completely avoid all self-induced suffering because they are essentially perfect beings within the limitations of their humanity. Um, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's possible. I think self-mastery is a process that uh, can, if you commit to it over a lifetime, can drastically reduce the self-induced suffering that you experience. But you'll never escape it entirely. We are, unfortunately, creatures that are trapped within a subjective perception of reality, and there is no escaping that fact. We are cursed by ignorance and very limited perspective. But as a whole, addiction, faulty belief systems, selfish behavior, these are all things that can be overcome through a lifelong commitment to growth and change. I think that is a huge part of what this podcast and progress theory is really about, because it's the most tangible method of trying to create more well-being and reduce suffering in one's life. I think realistically, whether more than I, or probably a lot of people would like to admit, a lot of the suffering we experience is self-induced to some degree. Before I go into that, I want to switch and go on to the next subcategory. That is the personal suffering we experience that is just intrinsic to the nature of existence and which is entirely outside of our control. Some examples of this type of suffering are like permanent disability, terminal illness, grief over death and loss, uh, being a victim of a selfish and undeserved crime, or experiencing just a generally horrible upbringing, having to sift through and overcome very faulty programming. There's more examples in this, but I think those are some of the most obvious that make up this version of suffering. And the unfortunate thing about reality is it seems that as a result of just chance and misfortune, some people experience a lot more of this than others, and that simply cannot be helped. We can absolutely do our best to try to alleviate that and to try to, as a species, alleviate suffering as much as we possibly can. But up until this point in the human timeline, some people just have a significantly worse life than others, not because they deserve it, but just because they were born into the wrong place and were granted the wrong experiences. And I think this is a very hard fact to accept. And the only real solution is to just accept it, because dwelling on this fact will only create bitterness and disdain and dissatisfaction to an unnecessary degree. I think I have struggled sometimes with almost thinking being consumed by dissatisfaction seems noble, because the inequality and distribution of suffering in the universe is it seems very unjustifiable. And I've definitely been someone who thinks like, how can I not be bitter given this fact? It is morally unacceptable to be happy given it. But I think the reality is that you just have to accept it and do your best to help alleviate it. Otherwise, you will be consumed by a bitterness that makes your own experience significantly worse, but brings down the people around you as well. I think there are a couple different solutions to uncontrollable personal suffering. There's no solution that allows you to avoid it, but I think it is possible to cope with it very effectively. And there's two different categories of solutions to this problem. I think one that's less tangible, but still very valuable, is a matter of perspective. I think it's a true concept that without pain, the experience of pleasure or bliss or joy would be meaningless. Without suffering, existence would feel empty. Suffering and pain, to some degree, I think, provides the context and the perspective necessary to actually appreciate and value joy and bliss and peace. And to some degree, this does feel like a coping mechanism. It is just how you have to view it in order to not be consumed by it. But it is also, I think, true that if our lives were only filled with joy and peace and ease and endless stability, it would feel utterly pointless. And it would no longer feel like something to be valued. It would just feel like the stagnant, never ending, and pointless experience that just never changes. Um, so I think while suffering can be horrible, and some suffering is so painful that it is hard to accept. Um, I think there is a lot of value in the experience because of how much it enhances our ability to appreciate the good things we experience in life. Uh, I think a more tangible solution to uncontrollable suffering is presence. The idea of trying to really live and uh, incorporate the temporal nature of human experience into how you view everything. Uh, because the one of the core truths about the human experience is that every single moment ends. Like whether it is good or bad, whether it's desired or repulsive and miserable, like it will end. Uh, and it doesn't necessarily mean it ends in uh, a shifting of experience. It might end in death, but it still will end. No suffering is permanent, and no joy lasts. Um, and so, when facing suffering like the death of a loved one, uh, an illness, a permanent shift in your life experience due to some horrible and uncontrollable accident, I think one of the most powerful ways to handle it and to move past it efficiently is to really focus on the fact that the physical pain you experience, the emotional uh, difficulty and dissatisfaction uh, that comes with whatever you are experiencing will fade, and there will be joy again. There will be bliss again, uh, and it will happen before you know it. Because while it does seem like we are stuck in this moment, think of all the moments that you felt stuck in that are over and behind you. And it's very hard to actually maintain this perspective, at least from my experience. I really try to make presence and mindfulness a core part of how I operate, but it's incredibly easy to get lost in your thoughts and to focus on the future or focus on the past and be consumed by it, and to feel like this moment is all there is, or it is all consuming and unending. But it's not. And before you know it, days will pass, months will pass, years will pass, and the suffering you're experiencing will end. Um, Going back to an idea I started to go into when I was talking about personal experienced, self-induced suffering. Uh, I think it is kind of difficult to actually identify uh, if something is self-induced or it's uncontrollable. I think more than, at least when I look at my life and how I've responded to things that have happened to me, there's a tendency to try to uh, shirk ownership and make things out to be uncontrollable when there is some decision, whether it was years ago or some series of decisions that seem small and inconsequential while being made, but have ultimately led to pain that is self-induced. Uh, and I think, in theory, if someone made all the right decisions for themselves, if they lived in a way which actually negated all possible self-induced suffering they could experience, their lives would probably be filled with a lot of joy and peace and stability. Uh, and they would still experience uncontrollable suffering. The death is inescapable, and as a result, grief is inescapable. Illness and injury, unless you're extremely lucky, are going to occur. Um, that would still happen to someone, even if they made all the right choices. But I think a lot of that could be avoided. I think a lot of personal suffering, to some degree, is self-induced, and committing yourself to self-mastery, to growth and development, and trying to better yourself in a variety of aspects can reduce a lot of the suffering that you might be exposed to in your lifetime. The other category of suffering that I think is very important to think about is cosmic suffering. And this is, it's a bit less tangible. It is more conceptual and philosophical. But I think it's still very important. From my personal understanding of what cosmic suffering is the overall suffering that is experienced by every human being. And I think when really examined closely, this is completely overwhelming, to the point where it is soul crushing. To put it into perspective, on this planet alone, there are almost 8 billion human beings alive in this moment. All of us are living immensely detailed, complex lives in which we recurrently go through both self-induced and uncontrollable suffering throughout our lifetime. We all experience grief and pain and misery. Going back to that uncontrollable suffering, like focusing on that, because it's easy to kind of to vilify or to lack empathy for people that are going through something that was seemingly product of their own decisions. But even just focusing on uncontrollable suffering, in this moment, like every second, there are people that are experiencing horrendous suffering and pain. In every moment, there are millions of people experiencing the death of a loved one, like crippling loneliness and isolation, uncontrollable and incurable disease, uh, overarching life dissatisfaction that is so painful that they genuinely want to die. And there are a lot more. That is a relatively minor list, a relatively limited list of all the different ways that millions and billions of people on this planet in this moment are suffering. Uh, and then to take it even further, like this universe is nearly infinite. From a matter of our comprehension, it is infinite. It is so large that we cannot actually fathom how big it is. And we have no idea. We have not proven the existence of life outside of our planet. Uh, and so there's a chance that we are the only conscious life that exists in this universe. But the same chemistry and the same physics and the same laws and principles that have led to the development of conscious existence on this planet exist everywhere in the universe. And I think there's a real chance that there are tens to hundreds to millions of, or to thousands to millions of technological civilizations that have developed throughout this infinite universe that are filled with conscious beings who are just as, if not more, complex than we are. So when you extrapolate that out of how many conscious beings might exist in this moment alone, uh, the amount of people that are experiencing horrible suffering right now could be in the trillions. And that is just speaking for this moment. It's not taking into account the entire lifetime of all of these species that may exist. Uh, the reality of this awareness, I think, is impossible to actually comprehend. Like, we are just very finite beings. We are trapped within one perspective, trying to actually comprehend billions of similarly complex experiences occurring at once is we're just incapable of actually understanding that. Um, but from what we can understand, to some degree, it really feels like the suffering that exists within this universe just grossly outweighs the joy. Uh, there are a couple different solutions to cosmic suffering, I think. Some are significantly less effective than others, but I'm going to talk about three of the most obvious and seemingly effective solutions that stick out to me. The first is just, I'd loosely describe it as unconscious or conscious ignorance. This is just turning a blind eye to it. And I think for a lot of people, this isn't necessarily a decision they make. This isn't a conscious choice. They just simply don't take the time to examine or think through the implications of what is going on in the lives of everyone around the world. To some degree, I think this is kind of a result of ego self-preservation. It's a painful thing to think about all the ways people are suffering at all times. And it is, I think, uh, never actually experiencing conscious awareness of this fact is that's blissful ignorance. Like, it feels better if you never have to comprehend the harsh nature of existence on a species-wide scale. I think some people, they do comprehend it, but they just don't care because it sucks. Like, why? It's painful to dwell on other people's pain. It's painful to acknowledge other people's pain. And it's also painful to recognize that you are lucky. I'm lucky. I think there's a good chance anyone watching this, whether when it is posted or in the future, probably lives in a Western country, probably lives in a fairly developed country. And just off of that fact alone, living in a developed Western country in this century makes us more privileged than most human beings alive. And that is not earned. We do not deserve it. We just got lucky. The universe granted us an easier existence than other people gain access to. And while very selfish, it is tempting to just ignore the fact that other people have it worse, not because they deserve to, but just because chance screwed them. And it is easy to just take our blessings and appreciate them and focus on them. But I think this is somewhat effective. I think just ignoring the suffering of other beings and focusing on making your own life better and taking advantage of whatever blessings that you receive in your life, it can work. It can make the existence of universal suffering a lot more tolerable, but it is, I think, morally problematic, for one, but also existentially empty. I think there's a lack of meaning and purpose in the lives of people who choose to ignore the suffering of others. That has a negative effect on their own well-being. Another option, and this is, I question not even talking about this one, but I think it would be intellectually dishonest not to, is suicide. Suicide is just opting out of existence. Like, none of us chose to be born into an existence that is completely consumed by suffering, ignorance, and vulnerability. And to some degree, ending the experience prematurely deletes the pain. Which, no one really knows if there's an afterlife or not. This belief that suicide relinquishes the pain of existence and the suffering that we feel is founded on the idea that death is non-existence. And so that would be a cruel joke to kill yourself in order to escape misery and then wake up in an even worse existence. But that is the idea behind suicide, is that this is a permanent escape from the suffering that is intrinsic to reality. Uh, and this solution is incredibly, this is going to seem harsh to say, but it is incredibly selfish. Uh, and that is not meant to vilify or demonize anybody who kills themselves, because anyone who gets to the point where they think that is the best choice is clearly in a tremendous amount of pain. And their sense of self-worth and reality is probably so warped that that does seem like the only logical conclusion. And so anyone that is on the verge of or who does commit suicide deserves nothing but empathy. But there's no denying the fact that suicide is a selfish thing to do. Because while assuming that death is non-existence, suicide does eliminate the personal suffering experienced. It doesn't actually delete it from existence. It just spreads it out amongst anyone who cares about you. And I think to some degree amplifies it. Like it increases the overall suffering that exists within the universe by taking that action. And it solidifies that your overall impact on the universe is very negative. And you didn't alleviate pain for yourself and others. You amplified it. And not only does it directly add suffering, but it also deletes whatever positive impact you could have by staying alive and trying to improve the lives of other people and improve your own life. Now, the last solution, and I think the solution that is most effective, is devoting your life to the pursuit of positive impact. This, to me, seems like the only solution that is both effective and morally acceptable. Positive impact, from my understanding, I think a general definition of positive impact is enhancing the well-being and reducing the suffering of conscious creatures. This includes yourself and other people, because just as other people didn't choose to be born into this difficult existence, neither did you. You don't deserve suffering, and it is important to care about yourself and be compassionate for yourself the same way it is important to be compassionate towards others. This is a concept that I have struggled with because I personally find the suffering that exists within this universe to be depressing and very overwhelming, and I so badly wish there was an actual overarching solution to it. But the harsh reality that I think is true is that we are tiny, fragile, and ignorant creatures who will never have the perspective or power that would be required to genuinely fix the broken system that we exist within. But to some degree that doesn't matter. Like, despite the fact that we can't fix the system, we can still improve the lives of people around us. We can still improve the lives of thousands of people and millions of people if we really commit to that pursuit. And just because it's not everyone, just because it doesn't fix the problem permanently, doesn't mean that it isn't radically improving the life of someone who matters and who feels deeply and experiences fully. Um, and that does matter. That is worthwhile. Um, I think one of the uh, what I am talking about here, uh, for me personally, has been fairly depressing. Um, as I've grappled with uh, this idea. Um, it's painful, and it sometimes creates a very nihilistic uh, mindset within me. But I think one of the most beautiful things about existence is uh, that by bringing joy to other people, we create joy for ourselves. Uh, both as a result of, I think, conscious awareness and our biological wiring, uh, we genuinely improve our own experience by improving the experience of others. And it creates this like universal solidarity between conscious beings that like the core uh, the core factor that unites us all is suffering and pain. It is the one thing we can't escape. None of us decided to enter this experience, but we're all here and we all suffer. And it's miserable sometimes. But the fact that we all suffer, we all experience it, uh, creates this feeling of connectedness, which is even more amazing given uh, on multiple different dimensions, we benefit from relieving and reducing that suffering for other people. Um, so I think for cosmic suffering, the only real solution, but a solution that is very powerful, is committing your life to reducing the suffering and enhancing the well-being for as many other people as you possibly can. Overall, when looking at all of these subcategories of suffering, I think the most important fact that I try to keep in my mind, and I find helpful in order to cope with it all and find joy, is that there is genuine joy to be found in existence despite the inescapable suffering that is inherent to it. Uh, this joy can be derived from a variety of things. Much of the suffering that we personally experience, as we talked about earlier, is self-induced and can be reduced from taking the right actions. That suffering that can't be helped and can't be controlled can be alleviated uh, and um, withstood with the proper perspective and mindset. Not only withstood with the proper perspective and mindset, but by focusing on controlling and reducing the suffering that you actually are capable of affecting, you can become someone who is so much more capable of handling the suffering that is actually outside of your control. Uh, and the overall percentage of your life that feels undesirable and miserable is going to be significantly lower than the percentage of your life that feels purposeful and exciting and joyful. Uh, and on top of this, on top of that personal suffering, by aiming to reduce the suffering experienced by other people to whatever degree that we are capable of, given our limitations, our finite lifetime, and our relatively tiny perspective, we can enhance that sense of joy and peace in our own lives. This was a bit more of a scripted episode than I want to do in the future. When I was writing the outline for this, I got a little bit more in depth than I think I planned to. And I think it's important for me to say that I'm not fully convinced that the solutions I provided to universal suffering are fully, if even partially, correct. It is a very difficult and heavy concept. And personally, I went into this earlier, but it has bothered me a lot. It weighs on me. And it has, it'd be dishonest for me to say that my recurrent depression and sense of meaninglessness is entirely attributed to this, because a lot of that is very self-induced. A lot of it is the result of the behavioral patterns that I have developed over the course of my life. But the general dissatisfaction I have felt for most of my existence, combined with the awareness of overarching suffering that exists within this universe, is enough to, at times, I have started to feel like suicide is the only logical solution to the problem. But when I look back on those moments when I started to really let my own suffering and the perceived suffering of others kind of lead to nihilism and mental destruction, I think it was a very warped perspective. I think there is a lot of joy and purpose to be found in this universe, and even if we have to go through suffering in order to get to it and appreciate it, it is still valuable and it is still worth experiencing. So, yeah, on that note, I definitely question if this episode and delving so deeply into suffering, it's kind of depressing. It is kind of demoralizing, I would say, and I think I probably focus on it too much to the point where it detracts from the joy that I could find in life. And I kind of questioned whether talking about it in this way on a podcast and trying to uh, spread that uh, rumination on pain was valuable. But I ultimately decided that uh, by not doing so, I would be um, kind of I don't know how to describe it. I would be enabling that first solution of just conscious or unconscious ignorance. I think it's very important to focus on and care about the suffering of ourselves and others. I think to some degree it is all that matters. And when, if the point of this podcast is to help people increase the well-being they experience and decrease the suffering they experience, it's important to talk about this concept. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if the ideas I explored are fully true. I don't know if the solutions are accurate or beneficial at all. But from what I currently understand, uh, I think this is an important thing to think about, uh, and that is why I made it episode 2 of this podcast. Uh, Next week's episode is going to be uh, going more in depth on the difference between optimizing for growth and optimizing for well-being, and why I'm trying to shift my own value system and shift progress theory as a whole uh, for to focus on well-being. So hopefully that is a bit more positive, less depressing of an episode. I think it will be. As always, anyone who actually watched this, or listened to it, I very much appreciate it. This is something, as I talked about in my last episode, just doing this, talking about this, trying to create something, at least right now, is very exciting and fulfilling for me. Uh, Even if no one's listening. But if you are, I'm very grateful, and I hope that you're able to derive something from the time you've invested that makes your life a little better. So yeah, I appreciate you. And until next week.